Okay, we are live, it seems. Cool. So, today, what are we doing? We're doing our sprint planning, I guess. And, yeah. Didn't finish anything this last sprint, so we'll do a quick informal retro, as we do, and talk a little bit about why I wasn't able to finish this last sprint. So I didn't stream on Thursday like I had originally said I would, because I was just not able to. Real life things got in the way. That's just how it is. I did, however, work on the project off stream to compensate for that. So I basically did the same amount of work, maybe even a little bit more, than I would have if I had just been working on stream on this project. So let me show off what I've got. And what am I doing? Oh, this is all the Git stuff, right? Okay. Let me get out of this folder here. Main. So I have actually made some pretty significant changes to the project. And that's kind of what ended up taking so long. Mostly the original design that I came up with didn't really work for me, and I needed to make some adjustments. So last time I had like a function that I kind of assumed was going to return like an entrance randomizer here, but obviously we don't really want that, because then how are we going to configure this code to use different randomizers, right? Like that doesn't really make sense. So this is what I ended up coming up with. So we still read the ROM file as usual. I think we want read true as well. That's probably something that needs to be in here. We want this to be both read and write. You'll see why a little bit later. At least I think that's what we want. I'm actually not sure. No, I'm actually not sure about this. Let me delete that for now, just because I don't actually remember. Here I'm taking the form directly, so I have a to-do here to remove that. I want to actually convert it to some custom data type that we can easily mock, and pass that into load config. That way load config isn't dependent on some data type that we aren't able to create. I generally think that'll be okay. I think that'll be pretty good. I also don't know if that's necessary, because yeah, well, load config is part of the interface, so ideally the interface doesn't have dependencies on things that can't really be mocked. So that's kind of why I wanted to avoid that, but at the same time, that being part of the interface kind of doesn't really make the most sense either. Yeah, load config maybe shouldn't be part of the interface. I'm not entirely sure at this point. So if I change that, that'll be an easy change. It'll be a lot easier than the change that I had to make with the randomizer. But yeah, just basically you want to keep those kinds of things outside of our traits or interfaces, because that can cause that can make testing very hard. But in this case, creation of the config probably isn't something we're going to be really unit testing anyway. I don't think it really makes a lot of sense. So maybe this is fine. Maybe we don't really care about load config at all. Maybe this doesn't have to be an interface method, period. And I think that actually makes sense, so I'm going to go ahead and change that right now. Oh yeah, we need to do edit. Now the only reason why I'm doing edit dot is because I don't remember where config was, but yeah, it was just under source. But this is actually probably unnecessary. We can probably just keep this as part of KatAM config's impl. So we could have a separate impl just for KatAM config right here. And this should be okay. Right, I have the method copied. I just do this. Yeah. And that should have been fine. So here's probably, instead of load config, we could probably just call it new. It'll be a smart constructor though, so maybe load config makes more sense. It doesn't really matter. I mean, new is just a convention, right? Like this is a smart constructor because it returns result, which means that based on some conditional logic in here, we're going to return either the config or we're going to return an error. Presumably, this is going to be using validated. Actually, I need to talk about validated. I haven't talked about validated yet at all. But yeah, I've been making a lot of changes to the interfaces and stuff here just because it's just, you know, it just made sense to. So this is what this is going to look like now. This is our trait impl for KatAM config. I think it's fine if it's down here. I don't think it's a big deal. The ordering of these. It's mostly a stylistic thing. And yeah, this is probably a good start, I think. I'm going to continue looking at the business logic here and explaining that. So we load the config from the form, obviously. This can be a hard dependency on form. This probably is okay. This probably isn't going to be a problem, actually. So I'm okay with that. And from the config, I think... No, wait, then we create the ROM file. This comes from the ROM file that we read in. So, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, all we did was we opened the file, and then that gives us a file object, or, yeah, I guess we can call it an object for now. I mean, it's not really an object in the OO sense, but, you know. It gives us a file, we pass that into ROM new, and that's pretty much it. This just is a ROM struct with a single field, which is the ROM file. Then we pass it to randomize game, and this is where things kind of get a little bit more interesting. So let me open that up here. If I go edit source slash, what was it, randomizer.rs. So in the end, I did actually go with the randomizer module, and I actually deleted the algorithm module, and the reason for that is quite simple, actually. I ended up using an enum for randomizer, so let me see if I can find that. Actually, no, I called it setting instead, even. Yeah, I actually renamed it randomizer to setting. So initially I had like a trait that allowed you to create different structs that implemented that trait, sort of like the strategy design pattern in OOP. And each struct that you created that implemented that trait would be a different algorithm. So we could have like an entrance algorithm, we could have like a randomizer algorithm, and each of those would implement this algorithm trait. And to me that made sense at first, until I realized that my setting that I'm gonna have for like which randomizer type do you want is probably going to just, you know, construct different enum variants. So I realized afterwards that, you know, if I want an randomizer, right, like there's only so many options for an randomizer. Like it's gonna be there's gonna be like a finite number of options. It really makes sense that what I'm loading from my config is going to be an enum. It's not going to be a struct. And also, if I did a struct, then I'd have to, you know, have like some kind of boxed impl or for a trait. Like I'd have like a boxed dyn trait probably. And I didn't really want to have that extra like dynamic dispatch and allocation. So I decided that, okay, we'll go with an enum. I think that makes the most sense. And then I realized after that that we want different we want different game modes to be playable at the same time. Like, so what if someone wants to do an entrance shuffle with an randomizer, or they want to do that and also tack on like some cosmetic changes that aren't necessarily like randomized even. So I went with this more generic setting enum, and it turned into a bit of an EDSL. Like, this is a list-based EDSL. embedded domain-specific language for those who are not familiar, and I actually quite like it. So here's our interpreter loop. Essentially, we loop through the instructions from the config. We get settings. I don't know if that's what I named it in config. I actually think I called it get randomizers. Yeah, this actually should be called get settings. Yeah. So we return a bunch of settings. This should be called setting. Yeah. Oh, that should be called entrance shuffle. That doesn't really matter for now. I guess we'll just go with cosmetic, because that'll compile. The entrance shuffle has like a type that's part of it, because you might want different kinds of entrance shuffle, right? There's the chaos one where every door behaves like a one-way door. There's like a standard shuffle where two-way doors still lead to themselves. So if you go through a two-way door and then you try and go back through that two-way door back to where you went, or back to where you came from, that'll still bring you back to where you came from, even if the door doesn't connect to where you thought it would originally. So you can, it's sort of like a uh-oh, I want to go back kind of thing, or maybe you want to do a little bit of backtracking, right? That's what the standard entrance shuffle does. But if you want to do like the chaos shuffle, then when you go through a two-way door and you pop out at some other two-way door, going back through that door that you just came from won't necessarily bring you back to where you originally were. So that's the chaos shuffle, and you can see this in certain randomizers like A Link to the Past. They have this with like cave entrances, right? So like the whole like loading zone shuffle. That's kind of what I wanted to indicate with that, and having entrance shuffle be its own setting like this, and then being able to parameterize it like this also gives me some options, right? Like I can be very precise with my settings. Like this one I know only has so many different kinds of shuffle types, so I can actually put that in its own enum within this setting enum. And then here's like the data for the entrance shuffler that is common to all entrance shuffles. We have Randomizer. Randomizer doesn't have a different type, right? Randomizer usually just works by like swapping IDs of enemies, so that different enemies spawn where other enemies would normally spawn. And that's pretty much all there is to an Randomizer. Typically, like if you look at like the Hollow Knight randomizer, that's literally what they do. So if there's a room with like 3 primal aspids in it, normally you might end up fighting like 3 enraged guardians instead. So yeah, that seems, or at least that seems to be what they do. They also have like some weird stuff going on there where like enemies can like be different sizes from how they normally would. I guess you could have some options like swap bosses around and stuff, but I think initially for this randomizer, if I'm going to add an randomizer at all, that's part of the future work for one thing. And also, if I do add the randomizer, I think I'm not going to have options to like swap bosses with regular enemies and stuff like that, at least not yet, because I doubt it'll work that easily. Kirby the Amazing Mirror kind of not nearly as well put together, I think, as Hollow Knight is, or not as easy to just like swap stuff around and have the game just work and not just instantly crash. I've already seen some crashes trying to swap entrances around in certain places, which is kind of interesting. So I doubt that swapping enemies like that will be completely fine. I'm sure there'll be some issues, and it might be possible to patch those issues out, right? But I don't know how easy that is, and I don't really want to mess with that too much initially. It's a lot of extra scope, you know? And cosmetic changes could be like, changing Kirby's color immediately, because, people don't like playing as the same character as they've always played as usually. Like, there's all those skins in the A Link to the Past randomizer, Super Metroid randomizer. Ocarina of Time doesn't seem to have skins, but they do have, like, tunic color. That's something you can change. So, it would be nice to have some cosmetic options, I think. But, again, that's, like, future work. In Kirby the Amazing Mirror, we have some options for cosmetics already built into the game, but you have to unlock them. Like, there's these spray paints that you can pick up, and you can recolor Kirby to different combinations of colors of, like, his body and shoes. But Yeah, you have to pick those up from treasure chests normally. We could just, you know, give that as an option right away, so you don't have to like find the cosmetic items. And of course, in the future, we could add like an item shuffler, stuff like that, ability shuffler. But I think for now this is okay. I might even just delete these. I just wanted to show this off as like a proof of concept. Like, this is how the setting enum would work, and this is why the setting enum is probably the right way to go. So I'm generally quite happy with this. I avoid dynamic dispatch. I avoid an extra allocation. The allocations aren't really that big of a deal to me, because obviously if you were to write this in like Java or whatever, you'd be getting a lot of these allocations anyway. And you'd be doing a lot more dynamic dispatch anyhow. But, you know, you might as well save allocations where you can, where it makes sense to. This randomized game function that we call from main actually is only taking... Oh, this is not going to compile. Let me just add that. So this is only going to be using these trait implementations. By the way, this is the same thing as going like C implements config and then replacing this with C, right? This is just infiltrate and argument position. It's slightly less verbose. I'm not actually a huge fan of this syntax, but it's kind of convenient, at least. I would have preferred that it wasn't impl that was the keyword here, because it's very easy to conflate infiltrate in like argument position with infiltrate in return position, because they're not really the same thing. Infiltrate in return position is existential. It's existentially quantified. Here it's universal, just like the generic. It's just syntactic sugar for the generic version, but this is a little bit more friendly looking to object-oriented programmers who are used to how interfaces work in Java. So that's why they added this syntax, and it kind of snuck in there in the original RFC. There were people who didn't like this, and they raised a stink when this got kind of stealth merged. So yeah, after that they tried to be more visible about these sorts of RFCs and stuff. But this is one of those points of contention where people who are, you know, if you're really into type theory, this is like a huge pet peeve for you. So it's kind of unfortunate that this is the way that it's going to be. They can remove it obviously in a new Rust edition, but I think that's kind of here to stay. I think generally the people who are working on Rust see themselves like this syntax. So yeah, I mean, if you like the syntax, then like there's nothing really wrong with it. I mean, I get why people like it. I just think that the keyword is misleading. But anyway, this is a function that's written purely against some traits. So config and ROM here can be completely mocked out, right? Like get settings here, we can completely mock the settings that we get from the config. And the settings are always just going to be a list of instructions. So this is actually pretty cool. We're just going to get a list of different setting instructions, and we can mock any kind of scenario we want. Like if the user decided they wanted an entrance shuffle and an randomizer, we can mock that. If we wanted to just do a cosmetic change, we can do that. If we want to do all three, we can do that. We can even choose like different kinds of entrance shuffle, and we can throw that in here. Another cool thing about this is that getSettings returns a hash set, and the reason why it returns a hash set is because you don't want to have duplicate settings here, right? Like there isn't a case where you'd ever want to be able to return multiple entrance shuffles. It doesn't really make any sense. So this will make sure that it gets deduplicated, and we only ever have one entrance shuffle. Now, of course, the problem with that is if we have multiple entrance shuffles, they are parameterized, so those won't be equal. I could change how we determine the equality of entrance shuffles so that all entrance shuffles, no matter what they're parameterized with, are considered the same, and that way the hash set doesn't doesn't consider, or it has to like pick one of the two, right? We could do something like that, but I haven't really thought that far ahead yet. I thought the hash set made sense, though, for now. I mean, I could just change it to a vector if I want to, and then we could just say, screw it. If we have multiple entrance shuffles, that's fine. Ideally, I think they are kind of unique, right? Ideally, we don't have duplicates at all. But I don't know if getting to that level of precision in the types is necessarily worth it. So I'm kind of leaving it as it is. I think the hash set will work well enough. And if I think of a better solution, maybe I'll throw that in here instead. But this is the best solution that I've got for now, okay? I think this is probably going to be fine. We could always just, try and dedupe a vector instead. If there's a function for like deduping a vector, I might call that. Or we could do like a filter. I don't know. We could do a filter pass. We've also got validated right data here. Yeah, so validated. Validated is something that I'm a little bit hesitant about using. So normally if I was writing functional code, like purely functional code, I'd be okay with this. I'd be down to do validated anytime. Here in Rust, I'm a little more hesitant because obviously in Rust you've got a lot more control over low-level stuff, and elegance isn't necessarily the most valued thing. I like validated because it is fairly elegant, but it does have a bit of a cost to it, and that cost is it allocates a vector every time you create one of these. Well, at least every time you create one of these, and you have a failure. So let me show off what I've been working on with the ROM writer. Actually, I have to do an edit for that because I don't have that buffer open right now. And that's not correct. Oh, what am I doing? Okay. It's source/romwriter.rs. So the way that validated works is actually very easy to explain with the documentation here. So typically, let's say you're doing a bunch of operations, and you're creating like a vector, and each operation can either succeed or fail. So each of them might return like a result, for example. If you do that, right, then when you try to use the collect operation on this vector to get a result of a vector, what's going to end up happening is instead of collecting all of the errors, right, it's going to actually just look for the first error and then return that. So you're only going to get one error out of this whole collection of potential errors. And that's not really good. We don't generally want that. So validated basically behaves like an applicative functor, validated data type in Haskell or Scala's cats library, which collects it collects all your errors together, and that's a lot nicer, right? Because you don't generally want to have this short-circuiting behavior of like, oh, I ran into an error, let me just return that. Especially if you're working on like a config, if you're doing some form input validation, you want to return all the errors because your end user is going to be like, well, what went wrong? If they see one error, they're going to think, oh, okay, all I have to fix is that one thing. But then if they try and run it again and then they get a different error, then they're like, well, that's frustrating. Now I have to keep running it every single time. I want to get to the next error and figure out, what to fix. So this is a nice and elegant solution for that. It uses this non-empty vector because when you have a failure, you're always going to have some item in the failure vector, in the vector of errors that you get back. Otherwise, if there are no failures, then you're going to get the success value. So that's basically what this is. Good is for success values, fail is for errors, and that kind of fits my use case very well here. I want to make sure that all the errors that I get can be collected together and reported all at once so that it's very easy to debug problems. Now, the problem, like I said with this, is that it does a bunch of allocations because it has to, in the fail case, it has to allocate a vector, right? And that has to live on the heap because it's non-zero sized. And every time you want to combine two failures together, then you have to like reallocate a vector for both items, and that kind of sucks, right? Like you kind of have to like, well, it's not going to do another allocation. I think I looked under the hood at this library. What it does is it does like an append, which basically takes all the elements of one vector and sticks it in the other. So you don't have to do a third allocation. You just get an empty vector for one, and the other vector has been mutated and now has both elements. So at least there's that. That's nice. But yeah, you're still going to have a vector for each individual error that springs up. So if you have a ton of errors, that's a lot of allocations. They're all very small allocations, but yeah, there's a lot of small allocations happening. So it's a bit of a trade-off, but it is a bit more elegant than, say, passing in like a mutable vector, right? And then trying to push errors onto that every time an error occurs in like some kind of for loop, and then afterwards doing like an if check on that vector, like if this vector is non-empty, then do this thing, otherwise do the thing with the success value, and hope and pray that you actually got a success value as well. So in that such case, right, you'd have to you might actually, well, you wouldn't want to return an option of your success value, because that's an extra layer that is kind of unnecessary. But at the same time, then you'd get into the case where, that value might not actually exist, right? Like you may not have created that, and then you have to find some way of representing that. So you might actually have to use an option. You might be forced to use an option and then unwrap in that case. Or you could try and define your own enum that has like a success value or like a vector of errors, but then that's basically what this is. Right? That's very, very similar to what this would be. You might be able to get away with less allocations, but it's still going to be a little bit janky and not really ergonomic to work with. So yeah, I kind of went with this because it just felt right. I think if you're working in like embedded systems, you'd probably want to avoid this. It's probably not your solution. But for a web app like this, I think it's fine. So yeah, that's pretty much everything that I had to talk about here. Let's go back to the randomizer. Ooh, really? For real? Let me see, what are my buffers? Oh, okay. That's interesting. Why does it say I have more than one hit for randomizer, though? That's odd. It should only be one. Okay, well, that seems to work. I guess that whatever the randomizer thing was, it was some other file that wasn't a .rs file. So here's the validated we get back from our shuffles. So we will do a bunch of like shuffles and stuff like that. At some point we want to do some kind of collect on this into a single write data. So we're gonna have like I guess like a vector of write datas, sort of. Write data is basically a pair of bytes. So these are the bytes to write, and some target addresses in the ROM to write those bytes to. And these should all pretty much be mutually exclusive from one another. I don't have anything to enforce that you won't accidentally overwrite bytes from a separate pass. That seems a little bit complicated to do, so we're just going to trust that they aren't going to do that. Not really the best guarantees, but hey, there's only so much you can do with this type system. It's not that powerful. And yeah, we're going to collect it into one big write data. at the end. So I want the write datas to be kind of composable. I might add some kind of like combinator for composing write datas, because if you have two different write datas, it shouldn't be very hard. It shouldn't be very hard to work with. Yeah, I might add some way of combining write data together. I actually don't really remember how this works. Let me take a look at this. Because, yeah, we call... Okay, so I did change this interface method a bit. I decided that ROM writer should only have to do with the ROM. Keep a very thin layer. Keep it to a single responsibility principle, right? The ROM writer purely deals with the ROM. It does nothing about the transformation of the output of the randomizer and converting that to bytes and addresses. That should be its own separate step in the business logic. So I just kind of included that logic inside of here, which is why this validator returns write data. I just kind of assume that shuffle entrances or whatever, whichever setting we're using here will produce the raw like ROM data instead of some other intermediary output. Like that intermediary output can happen within this step, but then there has to be some kind of transformation step into bytes and addresses. And that, I think, should be fine. I don't think this will be a problem. Like that information, that mapping information, should be fetchable from the config. So this is just purely working with the ROM now. I think this is the best design I could have come up with. We create a buffer, we read the ROM file to its end. So yeah, we do actually have to read the ROM. So let me go ahead and change that. That was in main, I think. Yeah, we do need to read. Dot read true. And when we read it into this buffer, we then look at the addresses that we want to write to. And then we call write bytes for each of these. So I use map here instead of for each because I'm collecting the validateds, because I don't want to just return the first... If there's an error writing one of these bytes, I don't want to just return the first byte that failed, or the first address that had a failed write. I want to return all of them, ideally, because that will make it a lot easier to debug in the future. So that's what's going on here. We do this like .toResult thing. And yeah. I'm trying to think if that makes sense. Because here it's kind of just more like a stack of errors. We're just kind of processing them in sequence, rather than like trying to process a bunch of operations in parallel and then... Although it could be done in parallel is the thing. Yeah, didn't really think about that. I think it will be fine though. I think this makes sense. Anyway, we'll figure it out as we go along. Once we actually get into really implementing and testing this thing. That's kind of what I really wanted to do. Yeah, so here's write bytes. This is enumerate to pair the byte with its index. Yeah, we write the byte to the address. Oh yeah, and then the index is like the offset from the base address. Yeah, so we're probably going to actually need like a whole bunch of these. Yeah, because right now in the randomizer.rs, I return a single write data, and that writes to a single address. No, that's a... Hold on, I'm getting confused. What's going on? Oh, for each address it writes those bytes. Okay. Yeah. For each of the addresses here, it writes the same bytes of that address. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, we're gonna have to change a little bit. Not here. I think what we have in the ROM writer is fine now. I think this makes sense, but I think we probably want to combine all of our write data into like a vector of write data. Yeah, we probably actually want a vector of write data here. And then for each of those, we want to do this. Yeah. Okay, so this is not what I originally expected. That's fine. Alright, I'll fix this later. I'll fix this later, don't worry. I have ideas for how to fix this. I'm just not sure at which level I want to do it. Like if I want to make that this method here, or if I want to do that on the level above in the business logic. I'll probably do it at this level down here in the ROM writer, so I might change this. That's fine. We'll just turn this into a private function and then call into this from the actual interface method that we want. And I think that'll be good. Yeah, that's basically all there is to the business logic, right? We just get the settings in the config, we interpret them to do the different kinds of shuffles, we collect that together into a vector of these write data, and then we use those write data to write the appropriate bytes to the appropriate target addresses of the ROM, and then there we go. We're pretty much good at that point. Of course, now we have to add some option to like download this, and I haven't figured that out yet. The main reason why I haven't figured that out yet is because I have to work on the front end, so that kind of brings us full circle back to our sprint board. I do actually need to add a task to do that, but I think we're going to just close this sprint for now. So this sprint we actually didn't get any tasks done, and the main reason is because I severely underestimated how long it'd take to implement the business logic here. And I did kind of work on the ROM writer stuff in parallel, which maybe I shouldn't have done. Maybe if I'd fully focused on this or fully focused on this, I would have gotten a lot further. But I think I kind of needed to work this out before I could figure this out. And yeah, I'm at a point where I'm kind of still adjusting the interfaces, because the original design that I drew up in the diagram didn't really work exactly the way that I wanted it to. And yeah, there were definitely some mistakes in this original diagram. This is not accurate. So I'm going to be updating that. We're going to be fixing this up. We're going to be trying to finish maybe one of these tasks today. Probably not going to be able to do that on stream, unfortunately. But yeah, I had the goal of what am I doing? I wanted to close this. I want to close this board. We're gonna start a new one. Sprint 5. We're gonna leave the description blank because I just don't even care anymore. And we'll do the automated Kanban. I'm kind of annoyed that the Kanban boards that you create, you can't make your own custom ones, so you always get these stupid cards here. You have to delete them. And you have to like manually change the automation. Oh wait, what did I just do? Where did my other columns go? Did I delete the columns on accident? I thought I was just deleting the cards. Well, that's annoying. Well, that's not what I want. Okay, fine. We'll just recreate to do then. Gosh. Move that there. Done column. Oh, are you serious? Why does it say the name has already been taken? Oh, there's a scroll bar, isn't there? No. Wait, what? That's weird. Yeah, that's really weird. Yeah, that has these three. Why? I swear, this thing is really buggy. Oh, no, it's just... No, it was there. It disappeared. That's really weird. That is super weird. I don't like that. I don't like that. I'm gonna get rid of the automation on that one. We're gonna change the automation to something else. Yeah, their projects feature on GitHub is kind of bad. It's very limited in what you can do. Like they need the ability to create like preset boards. This is kind of dumb. Merged, or closed, sure. So you know what? This is probably fine. Honestly, this automation's probably fine. We're not exactly merging stuff right now, but yeah, we'll put this back in here. I think we can finish this stuff this week. The thing that I'm most concerned about right now is getting the front end going, because I want to. I didn't actually do enough investigation into how the front end and back end should communicate with one another. So, investigate halogen front end server. We're going to promote that to an issue. Prototype where halogen app communicates with back end rocket server. And I think we want to fix the download button. I think that's kind of mostly what I'm aiming for here. As for like a bare minimum. Maybe this isn't really a spike necessarily, but it is something that I need to figure out. I'll leave it as a spike. It's fine. Whatever. Let's do an estimate real quick. How big is this probably? I'd say this is probably 5, maybe even more. I'm gonna go with 5 story points for now. I think this is gonna be quite a doozy. Alright. If we can finish both of these, then we can start tackling this one right away and maybe get this done this week, but I don't know. It's kind of my highest priority right now because it's the one with the most uncertainty around it. Because if I can't get this thing working the way I need it to, I should be able to, but if I can't get it working the way I need it to, then I mean, we might have to fall back on using like React instead, which would be, you know, not the worst thing in the world, but I just need to know that the ecosystem around Halogen is good enough to actually make it usable as like a front end for this web app. So that's kind of the main goal with this. Yeah, finishing this stuff off because I can. The goal here with these tasks was, I think we wanted to add tests, right? So we're gonna add some unit tests. For this one, I think we can add some unit tests for this as well, because randomize is actually completely testable, like randomized game, right? Like I already described like different ways we could test it by injecting different sorts of like scenarios into this, by, you know, mocking the settings, or not mocking the settings, but mocking the list of settings that we get from the config. So we can do some very interesting stuff there. We could even get some integration tests going potentially. That might be worth like a separate task. But yeah, some basic unit tests we could definitely do. Oops, burped. Didn't mean to do that. But yeah, we can get some basic unit tests going here. I think that'll be fine. So with our little bit of remaining time here, because I'm gonna go until 12, because then I'm gonna go for lunch. Yeah, I think I'm going to just try and fix this up as much as I can. So currently the problem here is that this stuff obviously doesn't compile. I've just been kind of moseying along, not really thinking too hard about what I'm doing. And, well, I shouldn't say that. That's not right. I mean, I've been putting a lot of thought into what I'm doing. I've been rewriting all the interfaces and everything. But yeah, randomizer algorithm is gone. This is just going to be called randomizer. And I'm going to actually include a little bit more information here. This one's an enum interface. Yeah. Just going to do that. This one is a trait, so I'm going to mention that down here. Trait graph. Common, there's a few things that are using common right now, but nothing too important to worry about right now. Config loader is actually just called config now, and this has a trait config that this hides behind. ROM writer is, well, it's very decidedly still a ROM writer. So we have trait ROM writer. I'm very happy with this one. This was a good choice. RNG, I have not added this yet, and we actually do need to add one more. We're going to add an interface for JSON. Because we're going to need to read some JSON stuff in at some point. And we don't necessarily want to be tied to SERD. So this will be talking to config. So I'll just move this over here. I want it to snap to the thing, so we're gonna do this. Yeah, there we go. The Rocket API doesn't really talk to the config directly, at least not this trait. So I think what we want is something more like this. Just move this over here. This will read the JSON as well. I'm not sure how I'm going to do this yet. This might be a trait. This might not even exist at all, but I'm guessing that's what I'm going to need. The RNG, that's an interesting thing. We don't necessarily need an RNG. Is another issue here. So RNG is an effect, right? We would like to be able to mock that so that we can have deterministic RNG, deterministic seeds. So how are we gonna do that? Do we want to just pass that around? Because now we have this like settings thing, right? Do we pass the RNG to each and every one of these? And if people are just doing a cosmetic change, then there's no need for the RNG at all. I think we definitely want to use the same RNG for everything. Because if someone wants to enter in their own seed manually, we want the same randomization for everything. So if they do an entrance shuffle, that should use the same RNG as the randomizer, and that way all the enemy positions, and all the enemies should be shuffled the same way for that seed, and all the entrances should be shuffled the same way as that seed. So then you can share that seed with someone else, and they'll have the exact same game. Like we want that to be reproducible, right? So we ideally want to pass around the RNG. So I think the RNG is something that we actually want to pass in here. And maybe certain instructions like cosmetic won't be using the RNG at all. So yeah, I guess every seed, if you're just doing cosmetic changes, every seed will map to the same cosmetic change, and that's fine. That's honestly fine. So yeah, here's where we should be taking the RNG. I think that makes sense. So we'll be adding that in here as well, which means that this shouldn't talk to Rocket API. This should actually be... Ooh, I did not think that arrow would come out like that. This needs to... Hello? How's this thing work? What if I want to... There we go. Move this over here. So I want this to talk to this guy. There we go. No, don't. There. We have RNG. This is most likely going to be a trait. I don't see why it wouldn't. Ah. I don't know why I insist on the double angle brackets. I think that's just what I've seen in other UML diagrams. So yeah, everything's mostly just talking to... let's just get rid of this for now. Everything's mostly talking to the randomizer module here. Which has a function as well. It's not just this setting enum. It also has a function randomize game. Those are the two ways that we're kind of I guess like mocking things, sort of. Because I mean that is our business logic. Yeah. I mean, we're not creating like a business logic layer where randomized game is a method of some trait, which we could have done if we wanted to like swap out the business logic entirely. Maybe we want to do that, but I think it's easier to just write a different function and call that instead, honestly. Yeah. I don't think it's necessary to be any more abstract than we already are right now. I think this is probably fine. So we've got these interfaces here. Graph. This one's probably going to be double arrowed. I'm just going to replace this with a double arrow. And common is currently referred to by randomizer. So randomizer uses common. Who else uses common? Do you use common? Yes. So ROM writer uses common. Actually, it doesn't need to use common. This is entirely unnecessary. This shouldn't be here. It does use error though. Ooh, I forgot about the error. The error module. The error module is not going to be an abstraction at all, but we definitely need to add that in here. Error is going to be used by a lot of stuff. Just tack on error here. Error is being used by ROM writer. Error doesn't need to use ROM writer at all, so that's fine. Actually, these don't need to be double arrowed at all then, because I don't think ROM writer is referring to randomizer at all, or anything from randomizer. Yeah, this can be a single arrow. I think originally these arrows were about like data flow, but you know what? I think it just makes sense to be like, what do they refer to? Does the Rocket API reference the randomizer? Yes, it references stuff in the randomizer module. It calls randomized game. It also creates a config, so I guess we could have an arrow there. Yeah, so here I kind of conflated modules with interfaces a little bit, because I wasn't really expecting to structure things the way that I did. That's my fault. I shouldn't have done that. We'll just do single arrows for most of these. Yeah, gotta keep updating the diagram too. It's a live document. This thing probably is a single arrow as well. Yeah, I think this makes more sense. I guess more accurately, these modules would contain their abstractions rather than, you know, the module itself being represented as an abstraction. What if there's a way I can like just like change the style? Edit style. Rounded equals 0. See if that works. There we go. Yeah, we can do that. I think that makes more sense rather than doing it this way. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. Because I want this to be uniform. I want each of these to represent a module, which doesn't necessarily map to a you know, doesn't necessarily map to an abstraction. Alright, so now we know, like, the Rocket API creates a config, right? So this needs to be here. There needs to be an arrow from here to here. And oh, we don't need that. What else does it do? It creates a ROM. That's in the ROM writer. So that should be talking to this guy, like so. And we kind of have something like this going. Yeah, that looks good. I don't like this crisscross. We're going to move this arrow over here. Oops, I've got the wrong thing selected, that's why. Move that here. Move this corner over here. There we go. Whole diagram's a little bit off center. Let's just move the whole thing. And the graph trait, we reference it from the randomizer. Graph doesn't reference randomizer though. Graph might reference common, however. I think common is going to be used by a lot of things. Same as error. Error and common are going to be used by a lot of different things. This is going to reference error. Let's see, what else is referencing error? Is randomizer referencing error? I can check up here. It is. So this needs to reference error as well. Is graph going to represent or going to reference error? Maybe. It might. Yeah, it does. It does have a reference to error here. Yeah, so there's going to be a lot of arrows like this floating around. RNG? Will RNG reference error? Maybe. I don't know about that yet, though. We're going to hold off on that. JSON, I'm not sure about this yet. Config, definitely needs to reference error, because errors can happen with the config. Like, why wouldn't they? So we're going to add an error here. And what references common? So the thing is that the only things that seem to reference common are... Here's a case where having an IDE would have been really helpful, actually. I might switch to an IDE later. Or I might install some plugins for Vim, I don't know. I'm not using Nix right now, which kind of sucks, because I like my Nix setup, but I have to install WSL on this user and everything, which is kind of a pain. I'm gonna leave for lunch soon, actually. So let's wrap this up really quickly. Let's get the diagram done, and I think I'm gonna work on this off stream today. Why is this not attaching properly? That's weird. I don't know. This stuff is finicky. Yeah, we're just going to try and wrap this up, and then I'm gonna go for a lunch break. Yeah, because this refers to common. I think it's only going to be this that refers to common, actually. Now that I've thought about it a bit more, I think this is the only thing that's going to be referring to common. I might be wrong about that, but I want to say this is the only module that will refer to common, because I doubt that config needs to refer to common. Let me jump to config. Yeah, this doesn't refer to common either. So what is in common? What do we actually have in the common module? We have a string ID. We have an address. Address, maybe. We might actually refer to address in ROM writer. We have a destination. That's like a 4-byte array. That's interesting. We have this door data maps struct, which is what we are going to be using to transform, you know, from the output of our randomizer into the data of our ROM writer. Yeah, the bytes and addresses. Address, I think I could see myself using. So I think the only two modules that need this are randomizer and ROM writer. I was actually going to make an argument. I was actually going to make a case for not even needing this common module, but I think I actually do want to keep it, after all. It is only for like a few types that are being shared, but I could imagine more. I could definitely imagine more being shared. Maybe this is a bit of a code smell. Maybe this is not the right way to design this, but I think this is perfectly fine. This is serviceable for now. So this refers to common, this refers to common. This has a couple of interfaces. Enums aren't really interfaces, but they kind of, they sort of work like one to an extent. I mean, you can't really like mock enum variants, but they're very easy to create anyway. So that's sort of like an abstraction boundary. Okay, maybe it's not an abstraction boundary. Maybe I shouldn't put that here. Maybe that's not really appropriate. But we do have that fun randomized game here, which does call all of these other things. I don't know if that's necessary to put that in here. Yeah, this is kind of what we've got right now. I think this is a fairly accurate diagram. So I'll leave this as it is for today. I think this is pretty good. We'll save this. Design diagram. KatAM rando design diagram. There we go. We'll download this. We'll save it. And we'll also export it as a PNG. Sure. Oops. Rando design. And there we go. And now we should be able to update our diagram in our functional spec. I'm going to continue working on this. I think the only thing I really want to change is this. I want to make this take a list of write data and then, you know, call this write addresses. So I'll make a function called like write data, and then it'll take the write data, and then it'll call write addresses, which will then be a private function, and then from there, yeah. I'll do a bit of white box testing, I think, just to test these functions here. Not too much. I'm probably not gonna like test write byte individually. I'm probably just gonna call like write addresses, or maybe not. Maybe I won't even do that. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe I won't do white box testing with this. I don't think there's too many tests necessary here, but yeah, just some basic tests to make sure that the functionality here works the way that we need it to would be nice. Most of the compiler errors, I believe, that we'll be running into will be surrounding anyhow. There's a lot of places where I'm trying to, you know, turn errors into anyhow errors, but I don't have the proper conversions. I think it might just be a .into, but I don't remember. It's been a little while since I've touched Rust in any like serious capacity like this, writing like a bigger project, so I actually don't really remember. Which is kind of sad considering I run the meetups, but I've definitely done this stuff before. I know how to do it. It's somewhere in my brain. I'll figure it out again. It'll be fine. And yeah, that was kind of an overview of the design that I came up with. I'm pretty happy with it. I actually quite like what I have so far. Yeah, I'm not sure about the hash set right now. I might change that since obviously it doesn't really filter out all the duplicates that I want. I might just make that a vector and give up on trying to filter out duplicates. We will see. We will have to see. But yeah, for now, that's it for today's stream. And I will try and stream again on Tuesday with more updates. And hopefully all this stuff will be done by then, I think. I think that's kind of the goal. Alright. See you later.